Well, how are you doing? This video is going to be about the claim of parallel light rays. Okay, there's a lot of nonsense around parallel light rays. Um, our opposition claimed that light comes from the sun, and then obviously it has to come from all the other stars because they're way further than the sun in the heliocentric model. It all has to come in parallel. There is one major problem with that. I'm not going to go into that in this video, but it's not applicable right now. Parallel light rays, the reason they have to claim parallel light rays is because what they do is they start off with an angular size. So for the globe to work, right, what they need to do is they need to have the sun really, really big and really far away. But it can't be too far away because it needs to be a certain size. It can't be too big or it can't be too small and be that far away. It has to be a certain size and a certain distance for their claim to work. Now, here we have, I just wanted to show some reality. Besides this 70 and 60 degrees thing, or 65 degrees, this is the sun, just over the horizon. That's reality. That's what we see. We see this, right? We don't observe any parallel light rays here. There's nothing being observed as parallel light rays. This is just the sun. It's not the sun high in the sky, so at this time of the evening, it's turned into what's known as the sun mirage. So it's not starting to not even be the sun, because you end up just seeing a mirage of the sun at the horizon. And that is why the sun at the horizon can often look just as big and even bigger than the sun than it was at midday. It's because you're looking at a mirage, not the actual sun. But anyway, that's a separate point. The thing is that this is reality. This is what we see, right? So how did they turn this into a completely different thing where we have parallel light rays coming towards us, right? So this is most people on the opposing side, I find, don't have a clue about where parallel light rays, where the claim of parallel light rays came from, and what is the point of it, right? What we have from this is from that WS guy. The sun emits sun rays in every direction. So he's admitting that the sun emits sun rays in all directions. But as the sun is very far, the sun rays that reach us are practically parallel. So there's this little tiny dot here that's supposed to be the sun, and you can't see out at all in the globe out at all because it's so tiny, right? But he's right sizes and distance to scale. That's what he's saying. Well, I don't see, there is a tiny dot there, but who cares, right? You can see this, you can't see that. I'd have to literally zoom in and pixelate the whole thing for you to see it. The point is that the most important part is sizes for this claim, right? Because it's the size, right? The distance is based off of the size it needs to be for the rays to be parallel. A lot of people get this wrong. They think it's about distance. No, the distance is a necessity, so it can have the size, right, and still match its angular size, right? What they need is, I'm just going to go down through what he says here, right? From Earth, any two sun rays form a maximum angle of 0.53 degrees. Sun rays are practically parallel, but not perfectly parallel. So they're not parallel. You see, they go from parallel to not parallel. And if you can see here, these are converging, not diverging. They're not parallel, they're not diverging. They're converging in his diagram. He has converging. He doesn't even have parallel. He is converging, right? For most practical purposes, we can assume they are parallel for simplification. We can assume, right? We can assume. If you want to assume, you can, but you don't have to assume. But it's only an assumption. Do you see what this is? Like up here, the sun emits sun rays in every direction. For most practical purposes, we can assume they are parallel for simplification. In other cases, the small angle is critical to the problem and we need to take it into account. Here they're showing a solar eclipse, where they're showing the moon shadow being smaller. But for the moon shadow to be smaller than the moon, then it won't work in this way. There is a way of making a shadow smaller, right, using an object and a light source. But this is not like this. It isn't. This is not how it works. What you have to do is block out the light with the object. That can change the shadow or bring the object towards the surface that the shadow is on. It won't work like this. So that's another sidebar anyway. But the point is that this is all sideways and messed up, right? They're not. These aren't parallel sun rays. This is not parallel. We end up with a small moon shadow that's 70 miles wide or something, they reckon, during a solar eclipse. Yet the moon is claimed to be, I don't know, how much was it, 2,000 miles in diameter, plus 2,000 plus miles in diameter, and you end up with a 70-mile wide moon shadow. Isn't it more likely that the sun causes the moon to cast a bigger shadow? Wouldn't that be more reality? But anyway, we're not dealing with reality when we're dealing with the people we deal with, right? So we have to go into a crazy world to deal with them. It's hard sometimes to keep your sanity when you're dealing with people who have lost theirs. That's basically it. But we'll move on from this. Here you have a more correct depiction, right? Although the sizes are not correct, right? Light rays reaching the Earth are almost parallel. So they're not parallel. Or they are parallel. You know what I mean? They need them to be exactly parallel, right? For where the origin of the claim came from. But because the light from the sun does diverge, even our opposition admit it, right? They have to claim that they're almost parallel. But for the reason they need them to be parallel, they can't be almost parallel. They have to be absolutely parallel. But it doesn't matter, because the whole point is you have this massive diameter here of the sun in the heliocentric model. You have this small little diameter of the globe Earth. And that is why the light is claimed to come in parallel. Because even though the sun is claimed to be 93 million miles away, its diameter is over 800,000 miles. So consequently, it's the diameter, right, of the sun that allows the light rays to be almost parallel when they hit the globe Earth. Right? It won't work if the sun is small. You're not going to have, if the sun's diameter is smaller than the globe Earth's diameter, you're not going to have parallel light rays, regardless of how close or far away it is. You're never going to have parallel light rays. It's not going to happen. The sun has to be huge in diameter for it to give the parallel light rays. So every time, and like you'll never see this in reality. You'll only ever see diagrams, orthographic diagrams showing a claim. That's it. This is the extent of the evidence to support this nonsense. Literally what's on screen, right? So the only reason that light can come from the sun parallel in their model is because the sun's diameter is over 800,000 miles, right, in distance. And whereas the globe Earth's diameter is like 7,000 or 8,000 miles, whatever. So you have hundreds of thousands of miles versus 8,000 or whatever it is. 3959 by 2, whatever that is. I don't care. It's less than 10,000, right, or whatever. So you have less than 10,000 and you have over 800,000. So that's how they make the sun. That's why the sun rays are claimed to come in parallel. The distance, right? Now the size and the distance of the sun has changed a few times. I think it's 5 or 6 times. I think it's 5 or 6 times. I didn't do all. Another flat earther did do it. Someone on Discord did do it, and other people did do it. And they found out how many times the sun's size and distance changed. But the distance is because it needs to match the angular size. Its angular size, which I'll get to in a while. But the reason why, right, they have to claim this monstrous sun is because of this. You have Cyan and Alexandra. You have Cyan and Alexandra. On a flat plane, right, parallel sun rays will give an equal shadow, right? If you can see here, the diagram is such a begging the question fallacy. It's like the Earth can't be flat because sun rays come in parallel. It's like, no, sun rays is only claimed to come in parallel, right, within your stupid model, right? That's the only, because ye needed to. You needed to come in parallel. So this is the claim. It can't be flat, and the proof it's not flat is because, or doesn't have a horizontal baseline, is because sun rays come in parallel. And if sun rays come in, sun rays come in parallel, we'd have all the shadows be like this. We'd never have a place where there wouldn't be a shadow, right? But this is a load of nonsense, because if we look down here, this is right here at Cyan. This is claimed to be the well, right? This is Alexandria, right? So these parallel sun rays that are hitting this curved surface, right? You have this well here with no shadow, but you have this obelisk here in Alexandria with a shadow. But how could you have a GP like this? This is the thing, right? This is the only way they can make this work. They have to have parallel sun rays for them to curve the Earth. Because what did Eratosthenes do? Eratosthenes measured, right, a shadow angle, an elevation angle, using a well in Cyan as the GP point he used of the sun. On this particular day, the sun is directly, solar noon, directly over that. Well, there is no shadow, right, or whatever point it is. And here with the obelisk or whatever, there is a shadow, right? The point is, doesn't matter if it's an obelisk, it doesn't matter, right? The point is that there is a shadow in Alexandria, there isn't a shadow in Cyan at this particular time of the year, right? No bothers. But the problem with that is that the only way that works, right, with reality is a flat plane. But for the Earth to be a globe, then is that they needed to change the sun from having a diverging rays across a flat plane to having parallel rays onto a curved surface. And that's why they had to give the parallel rays. It came from Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes measured an elevation angle of 7.24 degrees. That's what gave him the 500-mile distance between Alexandria and Cyan. He had to use the zenith. He had to get the elevation angle. He had to use the shadow at Alexandria. He had to use the point in Cyan as the GP point. That was his GP point. So then he had to take the zenith angle, multiply that by 60, and get his distance. And it's going to be 7.24 degrees. Because when you convert from nautical, once you get your distance, convert from nautical to statuate, it'll be 500 statuate miles. Right now, obviously, he didn't use statuate miles. They were using stadia, whatever. But it's the same thing. The point is that it was a 7.24 or 7.2 degree angle, and the only way to have that is over a flat plane. But the only way to make it work on a curved surface is to have parallel light rays. That's the only way to do it. And the only way to get parallel light rays is to have a sun that's really, really big. So that's really, really big, and so big in diameter that the light comes in parallel. It's so big, its diameter is so much bigger than the globe Earth that the light comes in parallel, or almost parallel, right? It's a joke. So here you have again, right, the same thing again. And what you notice with all these diagrams is, you see the way they don't add in here and here and here. How come on this is a globe depiction here? Where are all the other parallel light rays are here? At the top here and at the bottom. They only cover a small little bit. But in reality, if it was really true, if they're trying to be honest, then it should be all of them. The whole place should be covered in parallel light rays. But they only cover this much. Why? Because that's about as much as the sun covers in light from it, as in its rays cover. People don't see the sun's rays covering absolutely everything. They see them diverging out from the sun, and as the sun moves, the rays move. That's what happens, right? They don't see a parallel light rays. They don't see that. Nobody experiences that. There's no evidence of it because there can't be. It's impossible. You can't have an elevation angle of a curved surface, number one. Number two, the globe Earth's radius value originated as a back calculation from flat horizontal elevation angles to Polaris. there isn't any way out of it. So they had to create this monstrous sun at a distance. That's what they had to do to come up with parallel light rays. But same again, we just move on from here. Same again, 7.2. Right? See the way they're not showing arrows up here, arrows down there, where all the rays are coming at. They're not showing that, right? Because if you have, how can you have a GP point if all the light is parallel? You can't. There's no GP point if all the light is parallel. You can't have a GP point. If all the light is parallel, coming in parallel, you will never have a GP point. There's no GP point, because the reason there's no GP point is because what part of that is a GP? You can't. The whole, like, and this is totally off scale. The globe Earth would be way smaller in comparison to the sun. The globe Earth would be like a fraction of this in comparison to the sun in the heliocentric model. If this was the actual size of the sun in the heliocentric model, there would be no GP point. It's impossible to have a GP point with parallel sun rays. Which ray is which one is the GP point? There's no GP point. There's no hotspot. You can't have that. There's all one side of the globe has to be completely illuminated at all times, and the other side completely dark. That's the way it works. Well, with the exception of the moon, whatever. But the point is that you're always going to have one side completely illuminated. You're never going to have a position where the sun has a hotspot and moves around and the hotspot moves around as GP, but it doesn't have a GP. The whole one side of the globe is a GP, as Chocolate says, super GP. It's nonsense. How come they're not adding in all the arrows up here that they should be adding in? Because they want to keep it local, but they want to also make you think that light rays are parallel. There we are again. Where's all this? You should have arrows all the way down the page here, but they don't have them. Why don't they have them? Because they want to keep it local, because local is what you know, it's what you experience. But they want to also add in parallel light rays, because they need it to be parallel for their shadows to work. That's the only reason that they have it. It's total nonsense. Shadows don't work on a globe. Shadows don't work on a globe unless there's parallel light rays. Here is, right, this is reality. This is a flat, right, horizontal plane with, buildings, houses, whatever. It could be mountains, blah, blah, blah. Here is diverging light rays. Here you have shadows. That's it. There's a depiction of shadows with, this is reality. What looks more like reality, that or this? That's reality. They're both diagrams, they're both depictions. Which one looks like reality? Not this one. Here we are again. Science says sun rays reach our parallel. Here, there you go. Right, and this is like a huge Earth in comparison to the sun. But even if the sun was this size and this close, like, you'd never have a GP point. What part is the GP point? There's no GP point. There can't be. The whole thing is illuminated. It's not like there's one hotspot. There isn't a one hotspot. The whole half of the globe is a hotspot. It's total nonsense. But then you go on to the eclipse, and you have when they converge in a cone to make a small part of totality. Do you know what I mean? It's like, except on an eclipse when they have to change it all around. But the point is that the only reason they have these parallel light rays is to make shadows work on their globe. So they have to make the sun really, 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 really big in diameter. But the distance, that's based on the angular size, which I'll get to in a minute. So here we are again, same thing again, right? They're shown here, but they're shown here this is more concentrated, and up here the rays start to, this is when they're kind of hitting all in the same kind of area, and here like they're overlapping each other, blah blah blah. It's all nonsense. Now, this here, right? I'm going to show you this again in a second. This was claimed to be parallel light rays. Someone tried to make parallel light rays. It's pathetic, but someone did try to do this. They made a video. They did a very bad job of it, because light is not parallel. It can't be. It diverges. The inverse square law. It doesn't stay. There's no parallel. It doesn't do that. It diverges out in all directions. Doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't. It's not parallel. It's not train tracks. Right? Here is reality. Where's the parallel? There's all rays coming in different directions, all from the same source. Where's the parallel? Look at this. There's a possible hotspot. Here we are again. There's a hotspot over there. Look, these rays are coming from the same place, right? How come this is more bright than over here? How come that's not as bright as over there? All these rays are coming from the same place. What's parallel? But there's no parallel. There's no parallel. That's reality. We don't have a parallel. This is reality. Not crazy world. Not crazy globe world. This is reality. Here we are again, reality. Where's the parallel? Where's the parallel? I'm going to point out something in a minute that's going to blow it apart anyway. No parallel. All divergent. See? All diverging. No parallel. All diverging. And there's a source up here. If this was true, and that was if we were on a globe and that was 800,000 miles in diameter, the whole thing would be lit up, regardless of its supposed angular size, or I suppose its actual size in comparison to its angular size. Here we are. Look, hot spot. There's rays from the sun. Where's the parallel? They're all divergent. Every one of them divergent. There's no parallel. There's only divergent. I don't know what the sun is. I don't want to make a claim about it, but I know it doesn't have parallel light. Here we are again. Where's the parallel? It's not there. It's all divergent. There is no parallel light from the sun or from anywhere else. Doesn't come. Doesn't happen. Light diverges out in all directions. It covers as much as it can. Right? Going to go back to here. Distance to the sun, 93 million miles. Size, 865,370 miles in diameter. Calculate degrees, 0.53314. So that they didn't get that from NASA, that size. If it went to the NASA, it might be a little bit different, but it's always well over 800,000 miles in diameter. But this is what they started with. It's like, I put in the distance we're told that it was when we're growing up, and the size they're claiming it is, and I end up with this. All they ever did was start off with an angular size. They just started off with an angular size. That's what they did, and back calculated it to the way they needed it to be. They needed parallel light rays, so they had to make it for it to work. Right? These numbers have to work together for the rays for the sun to have such a big diameter, but yet be far enough away. Right, so it will the diameter will give it will give the rays an almost parallel. Right, allow the globe Earth to have almost parallel light rays, although they need absolute parallel for their claims. But they needed the distance to match the size, because the sun is an angular size. So they started off with the angular size. Right, what if we need it to be this size? Then how far away does it need to be to match the angular size? It needs to be 93 million miles away. Give or take a couple of million. That's what it needs to be, within our model. So this is the size they need it to be, and this is the distance it needs to be to match this. And for them to make the claim that the light is coming in parallel, which it obviously isn't. So let's go down here a second, right? Up here. I'll put a box here. There's this parallel light, right? Put a box, right? Here, it's covering all of the 5 streams. Here, it's not. Straight away, within, like, what distance is that? A couple of inches? A foot? Straight away, it's divergent. Parallel light is impossible. Can't have it. It's impossible to have. It's nonsense to think that light is coming in parallel from the sun. If it can't even be parallel there, how do you expect it to be parallel from a sun? But it's all only begging the question because they need it for, that's why they had to claim Polaris also as this monstrous thing in the parallel light. It all comes back to needing, like Polaris, they really need Polaris to fit the globe. And it doesn't. You don't use the globe's geometric horizon with Polaris to get your latitude. You can't. You have to use the reality horizon. You can't use their geometric horizon because it's only in the maths. How are you going to get your latitude with something that's only in maths and a real thing, whatever Polaris is? It's nonsense. You can't have parallel light. Look, I followed one of the rays down here from up here, and I followed one from down here. Now, those two are obviously not parallel. But if they were parallel, then how much curvature would you need to have here? It'd have to be up here. If that was supposed to be parallel, how much curvature would you need to have for them to be coming in parallel? What kind of curvature would you need? I mean, if they're coming in parallel, how come this is flat? You know, I mean, how do you match the curvature to diamond lines? How do you do that? Can't. It's nonsense. You know what I mean? How much curvature would you need? There isn't enough space for the amount of curvature you need to make claim that those rays are parallel. There just isn't enough space. You know, they always say there's not. Oh, it's the clouds. No, about the clouds. You know, these are obviously not parallel. It's obvious. It couldn't be more obvious that it's not parallel. You know, but if you want to live in crazy stupid land and believe all kinds of rubbish and argue against reality, then that's on you. So I'm just going to finish up with this. So here we have Jobra, right? So here is the sun. Here is horizontal baseline of Earth, reality. Here is something, the Eiffel Tower, whatever. And here is divergent rays, right, from the sun. So if I just make that smaller, move it over here, and if I move this, what does that look like? Isn't that exactly like a time lapse of the sun? Isn't that exactly the kind of thing that would happen if the sun was moving? It becomes like a time lapse. The rays start stretching out. That is what it looks like. That's what reality. That is just. So if we keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, you know, we end up at the angle that Eratosthenes would have taken almost. You know, make it a bit smaller, bring it over, bring this, bring it to, keep going to, there we are, 7.2. So that's around the angle Eratosthenes would take. So that would mean that the sun's GP would be straight down here at Siam, and he's at Alexandria, whatever, getting a little angle there. That's what happened. But for this to work on our globe, they needed the sun to be a monster that's 93 million miles away, and all the light to come in parallel. But this is what we see in reality. This is basically what we see. As the sun moves away, this is what happens. The shadows get bigger and longer as the sun moves away. Which isn't that just a depiction of reality? These people are scared. The people we deal with are very scared of reality. But that's where it is. That's what it is. There you go. The shadow of that would be here, and as the sun moves away, the shadow will stretch out. You know, as the sun moves, the shadow will stretch out. I can't make that move because if I go to move that, it just becomes bigger. But it doesn't matter. You can see the effect I'm talking about. There is no parallel light rays. They needed it for the shadows to work. So they needed to make a really big thing. But that big thing had to be at the right distance to match the angular size. So they started off with an angular size. They needed to make that really, really big in actual size. But to make that really, really big in actual size, big enough so they get parallel light rays, it had to be a certain distance away for that size to match the angular size. So they just back calculated off the angular size. That's all they did. Parallel light rays is rubbish. Just like the globe. That's total rubbish. Thanks. See you later.